Come on by and have a bite at the Crossroad Diner, where your spirit goes when it might be time to change direction. Hey, welcome back to the Crossroad Diner. I'm Steve McCurdy, your host, and we've got a very interesting guest today from the Seattle area. Welcome, John Latta.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate the invitation to be here.
So you and I connected through a site that helps hosts find guests and guests find places to be. You've got a book that you've written, and because of the nature of the diner, most everybody that writes a book writes that book as a result of having been in the diner, being at a crossroads and having to make a choice. But let's back up before that. When you were a young man, how did you think you were going to turn out? What did you want to do when you were graduating high school and picking a career?
Well, when I was really young, I was really into nature and bugs and animals. And when I was really little, I wanted to be an entomologist. I loved to collect rocks and shells and, was really into nature. Then later, I wanted to be a professional football player, a professional basketball player. Wasn't quite good enough or big enough for either one of those sports. Then I fell in love with fly fishing and skiing, and I wanted to be a fly fishing guide in the summer and a ski instructor in the winter. But I didn't do any of that. I ended up going into management for a large regional grocery chain. So, but I still was hell-bent on retiring young so that I could go play for the rest of my life, because that was my real mission. I wanted to go skiing when the skiing was good and fishing when the fishing was good.
Okay, so what you wanted to do was be a sportsman.
Kind of, yeah. I was a very active person, yep.
And you picked a career that maybe would empower that.
Yeah, I was 16 years old in high school. I remember telling my teacher I was planning to retire when I turned 40 so that I could just go play all the time. So
how did you pick grocery?
Well, I was working part-time there while I was in high school and college, and a friend of mine dropped out of college and went into management, and the company had been asking me if I wanted to go into management. It's like, no, I'm just working here while I go to school. And it just kind of hit me like, I don't really even like school. I mean, I'm good at it, but it's just not my thing. And there was no reason for me to pursue higher education. So I quit after 3.5 years of college, worked full time, felt like I'd been on vacation ever since, because I was working and going to school at the same time. It was actually really easy to just work 40 hours a week. Yeah. And so I never look back. I'm not one of those people that regretted not finishing college. And
what were you studying in school?
I originally started out in political science, mainly because I just like to argue with people. And then I decided business would be more practical. And it seemed like all the business classes were preparing me to work for a large corporation. I worked my way up, and I was like, well, I'm already doing that. So I just dropped out of school and was very entrepreneurial, did a lot of side businesses on the side, but just worked my way up really quickly. I was the youngest store manager at that time in the company history, and made a lot of money, saved a lot of money. The chain that I worked for, luckily, had done really well, and were acquired by the Kroger organization. In the late 90s, I think, and a combination of circumstances. Literally about the time I was age 40, I'm not sure I could have retired for the rest of my life, but I maybe could have retired.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I had a question and it slipped away. I know what it was. What kind of pushback did you have? What was the struggle when you made the decision to stop going to school and just pursue the career with the grocery firm?
Yeah, there was no struggle whatsoever. I mean, none. I quit. I never looked back. There was no problems with anybody or anything, and I was ecstatic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everything's gotten really bright over there where you are.
I don't know what happened. There's nothing. My lighting hasn't changed. There we go.
And now we're back. Okay. Well,
okay. You just had to say something.
We'll let those gremlins take care of themselves. What is the next place? You said that your book came out of an experience.
Yeah.
Share a little bit of that with us, particularly with respect to how it impacted your expectations and your trajectory. And in your
decision. So remember, I had planned to retire when I was 40, and by the time I was 40, I had a ton of money. I'd started another company on the side, and it was thriving. And so around that time, the grocery chain I worked for was required by the Kroger organization, and it really wasn't a fun place to work anymore. It was all being run out of Cincinnati, and a lot of customers were complaining. And so I left and started working at my company that I had run on the side full time. And
what was the nature of that business, John?
So it was a chemical business, actually. So I created a product that was, at its time, kind of ahead of its time, a biodegradable, non-toxic, environmentally safe cleaning product that was designed primarily if your dog or cat urinated on the carpet to get rid of the stain and the odor.
Right.
And since I've been in the grocery business, I was familiar with retail, and I thought, I want to see if I can get this product out to all stores nationwide, and that was the goal. So here's what happened, Steve. Right about that time, my wife got cancer. It came completely out of left field. She was young and healthy, took really good care of herself, but literally 2 weeks after the diagnosis, they were doing surgery and removed her entire thyroid gland, all of it. It was like stage 4 cancer. A bunch of lymph nodes came out too, and to this day has to take a pill every day for the rest of her life just to live. And then I had started my own company, and while the sales were great, I was losing money hand over fist, and all my precious retirement money disappeared. And in 2 years, I was $650,000 in debt, $250,000 in personal credit card debt. I borrowed against the house. I had an SBA loan, and it didn't look good. And then to top it all off, I had been I was a part-time Catholic growing up. We weren't really serious Catholics. I stopped going to church around age 14, and for the next 25 to 30 years was kind of antagonistic towards spirituality and religion in general. And suddenly I have this unbelievable fear of death. I don't know where it came from. And because I didn't really have any religious background to fall back on or any belief system around that, all I could think of is when I die, I'm gone, and I'm gone forever. And something about that forever and the oblivion just terrified me.
Right.
So, and then to top it all off, my wife is going through this profound inner transformation. She's gotten very quiet. She's reading books about God and the meaning of life. She's, I think, having her own little life review, like, is this the life I really want? Which a lot of people, when they're confronted with their own mortality, and literally has to take a pill to live now. Right. In the middle of it all, she decides to leave. She wants a whole new life. And so suddenly, instead of my precious retirement where I'm fishing and skiing all the time, I'm custody of my 2 kids, ages 9 and 11, a business that's literally a hair's breadth away from going bankrupt every single day. And I'm a grown man running around behind closed doors, terrified of death. And so in the blink of an eye, Charmed Life became, I felt a little bit like a bad husband, a bad dad, and a bad businessman, and a grown man afraid of death. And so that was my personal rock bottom. And, and then everything began to change after that.
In what way?
Well, so one of my favorite authors was Michael Crichton. And Michael Crichton's written a lot of best-selling sort of sci-fi, cutting-edge technology type books. Right. But a lot of people don't know he wrote an autobiography called Travels. And he also had experienced sort of his own version of rock bottom, his own midlife crisis. And the book really focused primarily on everything after that. And he started to explore things that he'd always highly resisted. He also, like me, was highly logical, highly intelligent, and highly dismissive of anything remotely smacking of woo-woo, including religion, spirituality. Okay. So he starts exploring things that he didn't know anything about, like psychics. He started going to psychics. He'd be making movies with Sean Connery, and in the evening he'd go and see psychics because he wanted to find out about that. He started exploring spirituality. He started traveling all around the world. And in particular, there was one story where he went to a retreat out in the desert with a teacher who was named Dr. William Brew Joy, MD, went by his middle name Brew. And I was so taken with his experiences there, and I must have read his story, I'm not kidding, Steve, 100 times. Just pretty amazing for somebody who was anti-spiritual, reading about Michael Crichton's experience at a spiritual retreat.
Okay, what do you think, when you read things multiple times, you're getting something different each time, or you're hoping to, or you're revisiting something that made you feel really good. It resonated with you.
Yeah.
Tell me about what was going on in that material that touched you to the point that you invested 100 rereads in it.
I never really thought about that, Steve. I think I was touched by not just the experiences that Michael Crichton there, but touched by how he was touched by his experiences.
Yeah.
And interestingly, because I think what's beautiful is sometimes I think we have an idea that we know about something, but unless we actually go and directly experience it ourselves, it's just some idea in our head, probably that we got from somebody else,
we don't know what we don't know until we
start. Yeah, that's one of my favorite sayings. You don't know what you don't know. And so I was so excited about him boldly going into an area that he highly resisted his whole life and having all these wonderful experiences. And he talked about how the high of it lasted for about 2 weeks after, and then he kind of got a little sad and thought, well, maybe it was just, summer camp for grown-ups. Did I really grow that much? Did I really learn anything? But when he looked back, he said he didn't see it happening in the moment, but 6 months after that retreat, he changed everything in his life. He changed his clothes, his car, where he lived, his relationships, his friendships, his work, everything changed, but in slow motion, and he didn't really see it at the time. But looking back, it turned out the retreat was highly transformative. And so after reading that story maybe 100 times, and again, I'm a single dad now, custody of my kids, business hanging by a thread. I suddenly run to the internet and go, I wonder if this brew guy is even still alive. And sure enough, it comes right up. And it looks like he's teaching the exact same conference that Michael Crichton went to 20 years earlier. Michael Crichton went in 1982. So for me, it's 2002 now. And I signed up right on the spot, justifying it, saying, well, if I go bankrupt, another couple thousand isn't going to matter.
That's right.
And
good for you. That was courageous.
It was. And I like to say it literally is because I was so defended against religion and spirituality and woo-woo. It's like
and yet terrified of death and needed to find some hope somewhere.
Yeah. On the website, I remember the little write-up saying these retreats tend to be very life renovating. I remember those words. They kind of hung in the air. I was like, I think I need some life renovation here because I just suddenly felt so over my head in so many different ways.
That's quite a promise.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and then almost the day I signed up, strange things started to happen. I don't think I even knew what the word synchronicity meant back then, or serendipity. I would call it maybe a coincidence or something.
Right.
And so I signed up at the last minute. So I think literally just a few weeks later, I'm on a plane flying to Southern California because the retreat is in the high desert in the mountains in Southern California. And as the plane is touching down in Ontario, California, I look over and the woman next to me is reading Bruce's book. I'm like, oh my God, are you going to this retreat? And she goes, yeah, I'm kind of scared. Are you? Yeah, I'm going too. And it was like, well, you look normal. Well, you look normal too. Okay, well, maybe it'll be okay. She was this sweet grandmother from Kalispell, Montana. 180 people on the plane. The only two people going were me and her.
In the same adjacent seats.
What's that?
In adjacent seats.
In adjacent seats, yeah. So it just, the doors of the miraculous started to open from that day forward.
No, that's amazing. So, so from a Crossroad Diner standpoint, the way that, our little perspective of the world, it's that place where your spirit goes when some part of you needs to change direction. Mm-hmm. And I like, we talk about the waitresses in the diner are Faith, Hope, Grace, and Lucy. And Lucy is representative of temptation and ego. And so you gave yourself the grace to spend that money.
Yeah.
You had a hope that it was going to be transformative because it built itself that way.
Right.
And you had the faith that whatever it was, you were going to eke out the benefit from it because you had seen someone you very much respected go down that path and have a transformation, and you trusted their judgment very much. So you put your faith, you borrowed faith from them. You borrowed some
Exactly.
faith from them. So then how did that develop into a book? How did you, what,
Well,
writing a book is a big decision.
yeah. So let me give you a little idea of why I wrote the book. My wife and I have joked that my book could have been titled "Rigid Rational Male Transforms into Random Accidental Mystic." So the very thing that I was so defended against, a lot of those things started happening to me, and really happening to me. And so, and part of the message I have with the book is it applies to women too. All you rigid rational males that think you know it all, but your life feels just a little bit stale, outworn. I just want to say, open your heart, open your mind. There is so much more out there. And I think throwing myself into that retreat with a lot of hope, probably to use your words, and a lot of sincerity, I really, really, really wanted to get something out of it. Even though my experience was very different from Michael Crichton's experience.
Sounds like you went into it very open-mindedly, even though you had a lot of information that could have biased you.
It could have, but I think, Michael Crichton wasn't a single dad with 2 kids and, a struggling business. He had the exact opposite problem. He had money coming out of his ears, but suddenly didn't know what he wanted to do for the rest of his life.
Right.
So, we had different problems going in. But, I'll share with you a couple things. The first thing I discovered was I didn't realize, Steve, how much I kept people at a distance. And so the intimacy in the group, the honesty and the vulnerability was something I really craved.
Right.
I determined really quickly a lot of people out there are suffering. And I walked away from the workshop not with a lot of crazy spiritual experiences, but with a real, I think for the first time, a glimpse of understanding around what compassion really means. And
how that opportunity had been around you all the time.
Oh, yeah. But I just was completely unaware of it. I was living the life of the hardworking, competitive, driven male, and no time for compassion. And so it was beautiful. And so what happened after that retreat, not in slow motion, it started to happen really quickly. I started to have a lot of spiritual experiences. I started to have profound dreams. I started to have what feels like angels or guides talking to me, typically in dreams, and giving me information that I didn't know was possible to know. And I started to really trust that and like that. And then 2 years into it, I had a profound, what is usually called a Kundalini awakening, this profound energy moving through my body, completely without my volition. Like, what in the hell is going on? And sometimes it would be gloriously blissful and almost like ecstatic love, and other times horrifically painful, and sometimes it'd be profound visions with it too. I mean, it was literally one of the most exciting, enthralling, and terrifying times of my life, because I kept thinking, oh my God, this is so cool. At the same time, am I going to be so weird that I can't run my business? I'm still dad to my kids. I coach their ball teams, I'm really involved in their life. And so it was an interesting walk across a tightrope, I guess you could say. And again, I like to say I was like that Nazi skinhead that was so highly defended against black people, and suddenly now I'm living with the black people.
Right.
And they're my best friends and neighbors, and I love them. It was
because they became people. They became human beings with vulnerabilities, and
and it was my ego was so wrapped up in being anti-religious, and that all these spiritual experiences were just make-believe. It was really hard for me to stomach, like, no, some of this stuff is really real. And that was another tightrope walk for me, what I would call walking away from the old identity into the new.
For you to make that much of a transition, for you to make that much of a change, you had to be in a place where you were willing to say, what I believe doesn't work, I'm going to have to try something else, even if I don't understand it.
Yeah. So coming back to what we talked about earlier about sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Looking back, a lot of times you can't tell what's going on when you're in the thick of it. But later, in retrospect, looking back, things make perfect sense. And so looking back after 20 years, what John was going through was a transformation into not just all things spiritual, but literally that competitive, rational, masculine driven. I was learning also all things feminine in ways that I had never really seen or appreciated. And I'll give you an example. It's one of the early chapters of my book. I had started the same time I went to that spiritual retreat. I went to therapy one-on-one. I'd never had counseling before. And the counselor said, "You're too smart for me. I'm going to put you in a group." So I'm in a group. And in the blink of an eye, for the most part, it was 2 women therapists, 10 women, and me. Yeah. And so I felt like this man alone. And the women were always getting on me, like, "John, you're so good at doing. You should try being." What the hell is being? I'm a single dad. I've got a business that's, hanging by a thread. What is being? So anyway, one evening I'm tucking my kids in bed, and I'm really good at, planning strategies, staying on task, almost military-like. And I'm tucking my kids in bed that way. And I tuck my daughter in, I go to tuck my son in, and he's happily babbling away about his day. And I can't get him to be quiet because I want to turn off the light because I have things to do. And then I'm thinking about what all those women said. I said, well, I wonder maybe being means just sitting here, like just listening. I don't know. Okay, I'll just try being with my son. And I don't know, Steve, maybe 30 seconds goes by, and all of a sudden I am overwhelmed with a love that I have never felt before. It was so profound, so all-encompassing, so deep. I can feel it even as I'm telling you about it today. I can remember where I was. I can remember everything that was happening. And I was suddenly so in love with my son in a way I'd never felt before. Right. And, talking about humility, not shame, I remember going back to that group going, shoot, maybe these women know something that I don't know. Yeah. And so my book is full of stories like that. I like to say also that I'm walking the path of the fool, and I keep stumbling into things that I just didn't know about.
It sounds like a very approachable rather than preachy kind of book. A lot of times, the resistance that you had to anything spiritual, that can come up in titling a book. That's the tightrope you walk. How do I keep? Yeah. How do I make this a thing that a person will see as approachable, comfortable for me, and not, somebody going, here's where you're going wrong. And so, talk to my audience a little bit about where they can find the book, and what you hope folks to get from it, and what you think that they would, if they came to it with, would benefit them most.
Yeah, the book is called The Synchronicity of Love, Stories That Heal, Transform, and Awaken. It's 119 short, true stories. And I did write it in a way that I hope felt humble and relatable. I mean, it's funny, when I became a single dad for a period of time, all my best friends became all the single moms. So, I kind of identified with them and having, it's hard to be a single parent. And,
I was a single parent, and I like to say parenting is like juggling fire. Single parenting is juggling while you're on fire.
Yeah. So, you nailed it. Yeah.
I identify with you there.
Yeah. So the book has a lot of what I would call interesting spiritual experiences. I explore the concept of synchronicity and how is it that it almost feels like the universe is rolling a red carpet out for you and just amazing, magical things happen without any effort. It's like, my math mind just goes crazy. Like, what are the chances of that? Like, how did that happen? But I also try and make it relatable because I really was just a guy, a dad, trying to raise his kids. And I went through ups and downs with that. Definitely went through ups and downs with my business. And again, walking that tightrope between trying to be the best dad I could and the best businessman I could, but going through this profound transformation at the time, and watching my old ego identity crumble and not really letting go of it very easily and kind of stepping into a new identity. And I suspect a lot of people in the country and in the world, something similar to this happens. They've got their real life, I'm going to call that responsibilities, and there's a transformation going on at the same time. I used to have a lot of employees that would say, they maybe were drinking too much or smoking too much marijuana, and they decide, I'm going to quit. I'm going to be, clean and sober. And they're excited about it, and they're enthused, and they quit. But they suddenly realize, prior to that, their entire life was centered around getting drunk or high or partying all the time. And so the quitting is the easy part, but realizing you might have to have new friends, new hobbies, new work. Right. Ooh, it gets a lot more difficult. And I think it pushes them out of their comfort zone. I think that's why a lot of times people go back to what was familiar.
Yeah.
And so, man, I was pushed out of my comfort zone every freaking day, it seemed like. And it was fun, but it was also scary at the same time. So I tried to be as what I would call human as possible and as unpreachy as possible in the book.
Outstanding. One of the things that happens with folks who come to the diner and they're in that place where they know that a change is essential. They don't know what it is, and so therefore they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And the biggest obstacle to change is this notion, I believe this, of identity. That, whatever it is they're doing is who they think they are versus how who they are is expressing itself right now.
Yeah.
And if you get your mind to the place where you go, that got me to here and equipped me for this new set of questions and to meet that and to evolve. And, the chrysalis does not know it's about to be a butterfly.
That's true.
And it is, the caterpillar dies. That identity dies. There's a transformation that is totally unpredictable.
Yeah.
And unanticipated by the creature. And but it knows it, it instinctively just does that. But we don't. We are too smart for that therapy. We have to be in group. We have to, so this sounds really wonderful. One more time, where can they find the book?
Yeah, The Synchronicity of Love. You can find that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and I just found out recently you can get it at Target and Walmart as well.
Good for you. Well done.
Yeah.
Do you have an audiobook version of that yet? You telling this?
I don't. Just a Kindle and paperback.
Okay. It sounds episodic. It sounds like you can take a chapter and it stands on its own. And so that makes it for a really great periodic read, like, right before bed.
Yeah, I literally wrote it that way. I am this way, and I know a lot of the country is this way. We all have shorter attention spans than we're used to, and I like the kind of book. Michael Crichton's book Travels was written that way, and so most of the chapters in my book are literally 1 to 3 pages long. It might be a couple of their 10 pages, so it's perfect for taking with you into the bathroom, climbing in bed just to read a couple of stories. Right. And my editor did have me rewrite it so that it is chronological. So if you do choose to read from beginning to end, it'll make a little more sense than if you just jump in the middle. But there's plenty of chapters you can just jump in anywhere that will stand alone.
Okay. Is there, so that's where they get the book. Is there, are there other things that you would like folks to know about you if they want?
Yeah, I have a website. It's johndavidlatta.com, and my last name is spelled Latta, and you can find more information about my book, books that I'm working on, upcoming workshops, one-on-ones and things like that. I've got a blog there with hopefully some interesting stories there, and you can find everything about me there, johndavidlatta.com.
Thank you for being on the Diner. It's been a real pleasure to learn about your story.
Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate the invitation.
Okay. Listen, we do this once to twice a week, depending on, who shows up. And so, come back next time, to the Crossroad Diner and hear another story like John's of somebody who faced that difficult place of going, what I've been doing up to now isn't who I am. I'm bigger than that. And even though I don't know what it is, I got to step into it. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much, Steve.
See you next time on the Diner. Come on by and have a bite at the Crossroad Diner, where your spirit goes when it might be time to change direction.